It's early morning, 2024. A quiet Milwaukee suburb is suddenly alive with chaos flashing, red and blue lights bounce off of tidy home windows. Police cars line the street. Officers move quickly, their weapons drawn, and their voices sharp over the crackle of radios. A man in his 50s stands on the front lawn of a modest two-story house. His hands are cuffed behind his back. His expression? Blank, almost as if he knew this moment was coming. Maybe he'd been waiting for it for years. And that's the question that stopped the city cold. What took 24 years to uncover? To answer that, we have to go back in time, to a crisp autumn night in Chicago, October 12th, 2000. Melissa Turner was 25, an accountant with a promising future and an easy laugh. That night she came home from a long Thursday at work. Neighbors saw her silhouette move through her apartment doorway around 11 p.m. Moments later, a strange sound echoed down the street. Then, silence. When police arrived, the back door had been pried open, lights still on, the TV murmuring to an empty room. Melissa was gone. What happened that night would haunt her family and baffle detectives for decades. It became one of Chicago's most stubborn cold cases until now. But this is not a story about some file sitting in some dusty cabinet. It is about secrets that refuse to stay buried, betrayals hiding in plain sight, and the promise of justice that somehow never faded. Before I get started, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state down in the comments below. And if you love true crime that digs deep, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't regret it. Melissa was more than just another police report name. She was real, she was young, and she had plans. At 25, she wore her dark hair back in a practical ponytail, always neat, always prepared. She worked at Brown and Associates, a mid-sized accounting firm downtown. Co-workers described her as sharp, dependable, the kind of person who balanced the company books and still managed to help her younger brother with his college applications. She dreamed big, wanting to make senior accountant by 27 and maybe start her own consulting business by age 30. She was organized and driven, but never too busy for people she cared about. Her parents, Robert and Linda Turner, had moved out to the suburbs, but Melissa had stayed in the city. Independence mattered to her. Endale, on Chicago's northwest side, was her kind of neighborhood. Working class, friendly, where folks still said good morning and meant it. October 2000 found fall in full bloom. The maple trees glowed red and gold, and there was a crisp chill to the air signaling the presence of winter. Thursday, October 12th, began like any other day. Melissa left her apartment around 7:30 a.m., green cloth bag over her shoulder. Inside, her wallet, a few unpaid bills, apartment keys, a granola bar, and a paperback novel she read on the train. Co-workers remembered her being her usual self, maybe a little tired since tax season prep was ramping up, but in good spirits. She joked during lunch, mentioned maybe catching a movie that weekend with her boyfriend Tom. Tom Bradshaw, IT guy, reliable, low-key. They'd been dating about 8 months after meeting at a backyard barbecue that summer. Nothing unusual there. Melissa clocked out at 5:30 p.m., caught the Blue Line home, and got off at the Belmont-Kimball stop. She walked 6 blocks to her apartment, same route she always took. Neighbors saw her around 6:15. Mrs. Cowlick was across the street and waved. Melissa waved back. Kids were still riding bikes on the sidewalk. She even stopped by the corner store to grab milk and a frozen dinner. The clerk, an older man named Rye, remembered her clearly. She smiled, said thank you. Just another ordinary evening. Melissa arrived at her apartment complex just before 6:30. First floor unit, small porch, beige siding, affordable, quiet, close to the train. Exactly what she liked. And then, nothing. Between 6:30 and 11 p.m., what Melissa did remains a mystery. She probably had dinner, maybe watched TV. She called her mom around 7:15. Nothing unusual, just the kind of check-in adult daughters make. Told her she was tired, planned to turn in early. Vincent Ramos remembered it clearly. It was around 11 o'clock when he saw Melissa standing outside her apartment door, fumbling with her keys. That familiar green bag was still hanging from her shoulder. It looked like she had just come from somewhere, maybe to run an errand or take a short walk to clear her head. I figured she just ran out to grab something, Vincent later told detectives. Didn't think much of it. He called out, "Evening." Melissa looked up, smiled politely at him, and nodded before disappearing inside her apartment. That would be the last confirmed sighting of Melissa Turner alive. 11:37 p.m. A 911 call came through. The caller was an elderly woman who lived 2 doors down. Her voice shook as she told dispatch she'd heard a loud thud, like something heavy hitting the floor or a door slamming hard. Then raised voices. She couldn't make out the words. Then silence. A patrol unit was dispatched. Estimated time of arrival, 10 minutes. By the time officers Delgado and Pritchard arrived, at 11:51 p.m., the street was quiet once more. Porch lights shone softly, and the only noise was the hum of far-off traffic. They knocked on Melissa's front door. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. The handle wouldn't budge. Locked tight. Circling around back, they saw it immediately. The back door, slightly ajar, frame splintered near the lock. It had been pried open. Police! Anyone inside? Nothing. They stepped in cautiously, hands near their holsters. Inside, it was as if the apartment existed in suspended animation, waiting for its owner to return from running an errand. The living room lights were on, the television still flickered a late-night talk show to an empty sofa, and a half-drunk glass of water sat on the coffee table. But the kitchen told another story. A chair had been knocked over. Melissa's green cloth bag lay on the floor near the hallway, its contents spilled out onto the linoleum. Her keys glinted under the harsh light. A couple of bills, her wallet still full of cash, but no phone, no Melissa. The bedroom? The bed was perfectly made, the closet undisturbed, and the bathroom spotless. No blood, no weapon, no sign of struggle beyond that one broken door and the overturned chair. It was as if someone had hit pause on Melissa's life. By midnight, Melissa Turner was an official missing person, and the clock began ticking on what would be one of Chicago's longest and most haunting cold cases. In just under an hour, the quiet apartment was buzzing with investigators. Crime scene techs, forensic photographers, detectives from the Chicago PD's Area 5 headquarters, all working under yellow tape that now wrapped around the small three-flat building. On the sidewalk, neighbors gathered, whispering, clutching their robes against the cold, and wondering what could have happened to the friendly young woman they saw every day. That is when Detective Sarah Brennan arrived. 15 years on the force, smart, steady, and known to be relentless when a case caught her eye. She'd worked everything from gang shootings to domestic murders, but missing person cases? Those got to her. The waiting, the not knowing, the way families clung to hope even as it slowly slipped away. At 1:14 a.m., Brennan stepped into Melissa's apartment, notepad in hand, her eyes scanning every corner. "Talk to me," she said to the lead tech, Martinez. "No blood," he said. "No weapon. Back door's forced. Looks like a crowbar or something similar. Front door locked from the inside, deadbolt engaged." Brennan walked the scene slowly. Living room tidy, couch cushions neat, TV still flickering. She had someone turn it off. A glass of water on the coffee table. A magazine open to an article about retirement planning. Melissa's blazer draped neatly over the armrest. Then the kitchen, the real focal point. That overturned chair, the bag on the floor. Its contents scattered. Keys, wallet, a couple of unopened bills, a tube of chapstick, a paperback novel. She crouched down, opened the wallet. Inside, $43 in cash, her driver's license, a debit card, even an old Blockbuster membership card. So, not a robbery, Brennan muttered. But one thing bothered her, the missing phone. Back in 2000, not everyone had a cell phone, but Melissa did. Her parents confirmed it later. A small silver Nokia, always kept either in her purse or her pocket. Nowhere to be found. The rest of the apartment was undisturbed by Brennan. The bedroom. The alarm clock on the nightstand still glowed 1:20 a.m. The closet, neatly organized, drawers closed. The bathroom looked like someone had only just left it. Toothbrush is still wet in the holder. Towel hanging neatly on the rack. Makeup bag open on the counter. Detective Brennan stood in the hall, crossing her arms, running the different possibilities through her mind. Someone broke in through the back door while Melissa was home. There was some sort of struggle. Perhaps that was why the chair had been knocked over. Then what? Was she taken? Did she try to run? And if she fled, why leave her wallet, keys, and everything else behind? Unless she didn't have a choice? Get prints on everything, Brennan ordered. Door frames, the chair, that bag, every surface. I want to know who else was in this apartment tonight. At 3 a.m., the interviews began. First to be interviewed was Vincent Ramos, the neighbor who'd seen Melissa around 11 p.m. He sat in his living room, still in his jacket, his dog curled up at his feet. "You're sure it was her?" Brennan asked. "Positive," he said. "I've seen her around for over a year." It was Melissa. She was unlocking her door, had that green bag on her shoulder. She smiled, nodded, went inside. "Anyone else?" Strange cars, people hanging around. Vincent shook his head. "Just her." Street was quiet. Next came Margaret Callahan, the elderly woman who dialed 911. She sat in her kitchen, hands shaking around a cup of tea. "It was loud," she said, "like something heavy falling, or a door slamming real hard. Then I heard voices, angry maybe. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman." It didn't last long. 10, maybe 15 seconds. Then nothing. "Did you look outside?" Brennan asked. "I peeked through the curtain," Margaret said. "Didn't see a thing. Thought maybe it was just a couple fighting. Happens sometimes, but it felt off. So I called." Brennan wrote that down, raised voices, crash, silence. Other neighbors hadn't heard anything. A few mentioned seeing Melissa earlier in the evening, walking home, picking up groceries. Nothing unusual after 11. By dawn, Brennan turned her attention to the people closest to Melissa. The boyfriend, Tom Bradshaw, was brought in around 6 a.m. He looked wrecked, eyes red, fingers fidgeting, his voice unsteady. "Where were you last night between 10 and midnight?" Brennan asked. "At home. My apartment in Wicker Park, playing video games online with a friend. We were on the phone the entire time, from about 10:30 until 1 o'clock. We'll need to check on that." "Of course. Whatever you need." This story checked out. The phone records confirmed the call, and his friend corroborated him. Tom was nowhere near Endell that night. "When's the last time you saw Melissa?" "Tuesday," he said quietly. "We had dinner. Everything was fine. We were supposed to hang out this weekend, maybe catch a movie. Any problems between you two? Arguments? Anything unusual?" He shook his head and his voice cracked. "No, everything was good. She's amazing. I don't understand what's happening." Brennan watched him closely. Her gut told her he was telling the truth. Tom wasn't their guy. By mid-morning, Melissa's family arrived, Robert and Linda Turner, and their 19-year-old son, Jason, home from college. Linda was shaking, hardly able to say a word. Robert kept his arm around her, his face pale, his jaw clenched tight. "Who would do this?" Linda whispered. "Melissa doesn't have enemies. She's careful. She's smart." Her voice broke before she could finish. Brennan gave them a moment, then gently asked them the hard questions. Had Melissa mentioned anyone bothering her? Any arguments, threats, strange encounters? Old boyfriends, co-workers? Anything? Nothing. Jason said quietly, "She called me Wednesday night. We talked about my classes. She was helping me with a paper. She sounded normal, happy." For the next 48 hours, Brennan and her team chased every lead they could find. At Brown and Associates, Melissa's co-workers described her as professional, kind, and well-liked. No office conflicts, no one acting strange, nothing that pointed to danger. Forensics came back. Most fingerprints in the apartment belonged to Melissa. A few matched Tom, expected since he'd been there often. Some partial prints on the back door were too smudged to match. No useful DNA. No foreign hair or fibers. But that wasn't all. The pry marks on the back door were what stood out. Clean. Controlled. Not the work of some random thief. Whoever broke in was strong, deliberate, and knew what they were doing. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on every door within 3 blocks. They showed Melissa's photo, asked about unusual cars, unfamiliar faces, people who'd been lurking lately. A few small tips trickled in during those first weeks. Someone thought they'd seen a dark sedan parked on the block that night. Another person reported a man passing by the building at about 10:30, but nothing stuck. No license plates, no solid descriptions, just fragments that led nowhere. Days turned into a week, then two. Suddenly, Melissa's face was everywhere. On the local news, on flyers taped to the lampposts in corner stores across Endell. Her family gave a news conference, their voices shaking as they begged for assistance. Inside the detective bureau, the theory board was starting to look desperate. Burglary interrupted? One note read. Random abduction? Another, someone she knew, circled in red. Detective Brennan barely slept. She worked 16-hour days chasing every single lead, no matter how thin. Still, the trail kept fading. No body, no witnesses, no suspect. By November, the case was stalling. By December, it was cold. Light engagement moment. Quick question before we move on. What time is it where you are right now? Seriously, drop it in the comments. Let's see how far this story's reaching tonight. By January 2001, the flyers stapled to telephone poles were fading. Snow and rain had peeled the ink until Melissa's smile was just a ghost of an image. The local news had moved on. New crimes, new tragedies. But the Turners didn't move on. They couldn't. Each week, sometimes 2 times a week, Linda Turner would call Detective Brennan. Anything new? She'd ask, her voice thinner each time. We're still working it, Brennan always said, and she meant it. But inside, she knew the truth. The leads had all but evaporated. The dark sedan, traced to a resident a few blocks over, completely accounted for. The man seen at 10:30? A neighborhood jogger, cleared within hours. Every theory, every hunch, dead ends. Forensics had nothing new. The partial prints were too degraded for a match. No DNA, no weapon. Without a body, there wasn't even proof of murder. Just a small apartment, an overturned chair, and a woman who'd vanished without a trace. Robert Turner couldn't stand the waiting. He took a leave from his job and spent his days driving through the city, alleys, riverbanks, old industrial lots, anywhere someone might hide a body. He'd come home and be exhausted, hollow-eyed, and do it again the next morning. That spring, Melissa's younger brother Jason dropped out of college. He couldn't pretend life was normal anymore, not while his sister was still out there somewhere. The family organized search parties, dozens of volunteers combing through forest preserves, train tracks, construction sites. They distributed flyers at grocery stores, at bus stops, at train stations. They didn't allow Melissa's name to disappear. They held a vigil every year on October 12th at Endell Park. Candles, photographs, soft prayers in the chilly night air. The neighbors came, the friends came, and Tom Bradshaw, the boyfriend, came too. Always silent, always carrying that weight of guilt he couldn't save her. Over time, the crowd grew smaller, and yet the Turners continued to show up. For Detective Brennan, the case remained personal. The file never left Melissa's desk. On the slow weeks, she'd reopen it, flip through the witness statements, and stare at those crime scene photos, searching for something she might have missed. Her captain, Lewinsky, eventually pulled her aside. "Sarah, sometimes we don't get the answers," he said softly. "You've done everything you can. There are other cases that need you now. Cold, not closed. Cold." That distinction haunted her. Even after she was reassigned, Brennan couldn't let it go. She kept digging on her time. Late nights, weekends. She contacted the FBI, hoping their labs could find something the city couldn't. They reviewed the file. They agreed it was maddening, but without new evidence, their hands were tied. She resubmitted those degraded DNA samples twice over the years as the technology got better. Both times, nothing usable. And yet, the case lingered in her thoughts. She'd lie awake replaying the timeline in her head. Melissa coming home at 6:30. Those missing hours before 11. Last seen by Vincent Ramos. The forced door. The vanished woman. Who came through that door? And why? By 2005, life had moved on, but not justice. For Brennan, a promotion to sergeant had brought new cases, new responsibilities. And Melissa Turner's file? It went into a brown storage box labeled Cold Case Archives. That's where Melissa Turner's story sat. Wedged between a 1998 robbery homicide in a 2002 hit and run. The years passed by, and Endell changed with them. It was still a close-knit neighborhood, but something had shifted since Melissa vanished. People double-checked their locks. They watched strangers a little more closely. Parents began to walk their daughters home at night. Fear had quietly woven itself into the rhythm of everyday life. And in that kind of silence, stories start to grow. There were whispers, rumors that spread like small-town folklore. Some said Melissa had simply run away, started fresh somewhere new, maybe California, maybe Arizona. It was easier to imagine that than some of the darker possibilities. Others swore it was the work of a drifter, someone just passing through who'd slipped away before anyone noticed. And then there were the ugly theories, the ones that pointed fingers at familiar faces, neighbors, friends. No proof, just suspicion. And suspicion can tear a community apart. By 2003, Melissa's boyfriend, Tom Bradshaw, had had enough. Too many memories, too much pain. He packed up and moved to Denver, hoping distance might dull what Chicago wouldn't let him forget. Back home, Linda and Robert Turner were aging faster than their years. Linda's hair turned gray overnight, or so it seemed. His hands began shaking a little. They remained in the suburbs, clinging to what little they had left, their daughter's childhood bedroom. Everything was exactly as Melissa had left it. Waiting. Jason, her younger brother, went back to school eventually, finished his degree, became a social worker. He'd tell people later that he chose that career because of Melissa, because helping others was the only way he could live with not being able to help her. Detective Sarah Brennan finally retired in 2015 after 30 years on the force. She'd earned every bit of respect she had, commendations, solved cases, and a reputation for being relentless. But at her retirement party, when asked which cases stuck with her the most, her mind didn't go to her biggest wins. It went to Melissa Turner. "There's always one," she told a young detective that night. "One case you can't shake. One person you feel like you failed." "You didn't fail her," said the younger detective softly. Brennan just smiled. "Then why," she asked, "does it still feel like I did?" Melissa's case was officially 20 years old by 2020. The Turners still held their vigil, smaller now, just family and a few friends who still remembered. Linda stood in front of her daughter's photo, the same one from the old flyers. Melissa, frozen in time at 25, forever young. Linda's voice cracked as she whispered, "We won't forget you, baby." We won't stop, but deep down, everyone there knew the truth. Cold cases are seldom solved. Time erases evidence, memories fade, suspects die or disappear, and life just keeps moving on. Somewhere in the warehouse, Melissa Turner's file collected dust in box 2447, one of thousands. A name, a story, a life cut short. Justice seemed impossible, until it wasn't. Light engagement hook. If you've been following this story and want to see how justice finally caught up after 2 decades, hit that like button and subscribe. We dive into true stories like this every single week, cases that just refuse to be forgotten. For the first time in years, Chicago PD's cold case unit received a small budget increase. Not a windfall, but enough. Enough for new technology. Enough to re-examine old evidence with tools that hadn't existed 2 decades earlier. Enough to give forgotten cases a second chance. Enter Detective Marcus Webb, 32 years old. Young for cold cases, but sharp, methodical, and stubborn in the best way. The kind of detective who wouldn't sleep until every puzzle piece clicked into place. Webb had grown up on Chicago's South Side, joined the force at 23, worked patrol, then narcotics, then homicide. So when a position opened up in the cold case unit, he jumped on it. "Why cold cases?" his partner once asked him. "Most of them stay that way." Webb smiled. "Most," he said, "but not all." His first month of work was a marathon of cardboard boxes, files filled with dates, photos, and names that time had tried to erase. Then one afternoon, he opened a folder labeled Turner, Melissa, October 12th, 2000. Missing person, suspected abduction, no body recovered, no suspect ever charged. He read every page, every note Detective Brennan had written, Every interview, every grainy photo. Something about this one stuck. Maybe it was Melissa's age, 25 when she vanished. Webb was 32 now. If she were alive, she'd be 48. But Webb knew better. The forced door, the overturned chair, the subsequent silence. Melissa Turner was dead. He was sure of it. The only question remaining, and could he prove it after 23 years? He began with Webb from scratch. He requested all physical evidence still on record. It took weeks to find. Finally, a note came back. Evidence locker number 4521, warehouse on the west side. These boxes were sealed tight, every label still clear, every signature on the chain of custody log right where it should be. Inside the evidence bags, relics of a life interrupted. Melissa's green cloth purse, her keys, her wallet, photographs, and the old swabs and trace samples taken from her apartment, the ones collected from under her fingernails back in 2000. They'd never been fully analyzed, as the DNA was too degraded at that time. See, forensic DNA work at the turn of the millennium was primitive compared to now. If a sample was partial or damaged, it was basically useless. Databases were tiny too, so even a good sample often went nowhere. But it was 2023 now. The game had changed. Detective Marcus Webb picked up the phone. "I need everything reprocessed," he told the lab. "Every scrap of evidence. Use the newest methods, whatever didn't exist back then." Dr. Priya Patel, lead forensic tech, frowned. "Detective, if that DNA was degraded in 2000, I doubt." "Try anyway," Webb said, interrupting softly. "Please." She nodded. "All right, we'll do what we can." 2 weeks later, Webb's phone rang. "Detective Webb?" "It's Dr. Patel." He sat up straight. "We got something," she said. "A partial DNA profile. It's not perfect, it's fragmented, but it's usable." Webb's pulse kicked up. "Usable? How usable?" "We can run it through CODIS. Maybe get lucky, but don't get your hopes up. Partial profiles rarely match unless the person's already in the system." He nodded. "Run it anyway." She did, and a few days later the result came in. No hit. Webb wasn't surprised, but he also wasn't discouraged, because in 2023, there was another route, a newer, more powerful one. It had revolutionized cold case work over the past few years. Cases like the Golden State Killer proved it could do what traditional forensics couldn't. The idea was simple but brilliant. Upload a DNA profile to public genealogy databases, find distant relatives, trace family trees, and slowly close in on a suspect, generation by generation. It wasn't fast. It wasn't easy, but it worked. Webb reached out to a forensic genealogist named Ann Bernaire, no relation to Detective Brennan, who had cracked cases all over the country. "Send me what you've got," she said with assurance. He sent her the partial DNA profile. Late September 2023. His phone rang again. "Detective Webb," Ann's voice came through. "I think I've got him." Webb straightened in his chair. "Who?" "I built out the family tree connected to your sample. The DNA points to someone from the Kowalski family, a male relative, in the right age range, who lived in Chicago around 2000. Webb's heartbeat quickened. "Give me a name." "David Kowalski, born 1956, last known address, Endale, Chicago, moved to Wisconsin in 2002. Webb closed his eyes for a moment. There it was, the first real lead in 23 years. "Are you sure?" he asked. "As sure as I can be without a direct sample. The genetic links are strong. He fits the profile. And Detective," she paused, "he had access to the victim's building." Webb exhaled. "Thank you." He hung up and started pulling every record he could find. Employment files, tax documents, DMV records, even the sparse digital trail the man had left behind. There he was. Average height, stocky build, brown hair, a quiet, forgettable face, the sort that neighbors wave to but never bother learning the name. He'd lived only 3 blocks from Melissa Turner back in 2000. Worked as a handyman, maintenance, repairs, plumbing, small jobs for cash, reliable enough, was always on time. Never spoke much, polite, private, invisible. And 2 years after Melissa vanished, he'd packed up and left Chicago. moved across state lines, started over. Webb leaned back in his chair, staring at the photo. After 23 years, he knew it in his bones. Melissa Turner finally was getting her voice back. He reached for the phone. Time to get a warrant. Light engagement cue. Quick question. What's the weather like where you're watching from right now? Sunny, raining, snowing? Drop it in the comments below. I love seeing how far this community reaches. Born March 1956, Chicago. Parents, Polish immigrants. Father worked factory shifts. Mother cleaned houses. David was the middle child. Two brothers, both long gone from Illinois. He was quiet even as a kid. Graduated high school in 1974. Never went to college. He drifted through a string of jobs, construction, warehouses, handyman gigs. The kind of guy who might fix your sink, or patch your drywall, or replace a lock, and you'd barely remember his face the next day. By the late 90s, he was steady enough, working across Chicago's northwest side, mostly under the table. Reliable, respectful, distant. And in the year 2000, David Kowalski was 44 years old, living alone on Roscoe Street, just 3 blocks from Melissa Turner's apartment. It turned out David Kowalski wasn't just some name from the past. He'd been right there, woven into Melissa Turner's world. In September of 2000, 1 month before she disappeared, he was hired by the property management company which owned the building where she lived. His job was to fix the old furnace before winter hit. He spent 5 full days in the basement, September 18th through the 22nd. Signed in and out every day. He had full access to the building. He saw the tenants, watched their comings and goings, and of course, he saw Melissa. Webb flipped through the maintenance logs, his jaw tightening. The pattern was all there. During those 5 days, Kowalski would have learned her schedule. When she left for work, when she got home, even the little details. The green cloth bag she always carried over her shoulder. And then Webb found something that made his stomach twist. Melissa had mentioned the maintenance guy to Tom, her boyfriend. Told him the man creeped her out. She'd felt it. That subtle instinct women know to trust, the one that whispers something's not right. Tom had remembered her words clearly. There's something off about him. But Melissa hadn't reported it. She hadn't wanted to cause a scene. He hadn't done anything. Just looked too long, lingered too close. And now the quiet discomfort had taken on a chilling new weight. Webb further investigated Kowalski's background. No arrests, no convictions, no restraining orders. But there were cracks in the record, tiny, unsettling red flags hidden in old paperwork. A woman in Wicker Park filed a complaint way back in 1989 against a handyman who continued to show up at her apartment, fabricating reasons to return. She said he made her uncomfortable. The name on that complaint? David Kowalski. Nothing came of it. He apologized and disappeared, and she let the issue drop. Then in 1995, another incident, this time from a property manager in Logan Square, reported that Kowalski was behaving oddly around female tenants, staring too long and asking personal questions. Again, no formal charges. He was just dismissed. Webb started making calls, tracking down people who'd known Kowalski back then. A former colleague immediately remembered him. Dave? Yeah, weird guy around women, not aggressive, just off. He'd talk about women like they were friends, like he knew them, but he didn't. It was like he made up relationships in his head. Another man said, he didn't have friends. Always angry about something, like the world owed him, and he never got paid back. Then Webb found Kowalski's ex-wife. They'd been married briefly in the early 80s, divorced in 1984. She was reluctant to say much at first, but when Webb mentioned Melissa Turner's name, her tone changed. I always wondered if David would hurt somebody, she said quietly. He never hit me, but he scared me. He just watched me, like he was cataloging everything I did. If I said hello to another man, even just being polite, he'd accuse me of cheating. He'd show up places I hadn't told him I'd be. Did he ever threaten you? Webb asked. Not with word, she said, but I always felt threatened. That's why I left, cut off all contact. I heard he moved around after that. I didn't want to know. By the time Webb hung up, a picture was forming, and it was dark. David Kowalski wasn't some hardened criminal. He was something worse. A quiet predator cloaked in politeness. A man who fixated upon women, who felt entitled to their attention, and when they didn't give it, he simmered. In October of 2000, he had been working in Melissa Turner's building. Perhaps he tried to talk with her. Perhaps she smiled politely the way women do when they're just trying to keep things calm. And maybe that wasn't enough for him. Webb started building a timeline. September 18th to 22nd, 2000, Kowalski works in Melissa's building. October 12th, Melissa disappears. October 14th, Kowalski is briefly interviewed as part of the neighborhood canvass. He gives a vague alibi, stating that he was home alone watching TV. Detectives note it, move on. He's calm, cooperative, nothing suspicious. November 2000, still working around Endale. March 2002, suddenly he's gone. Moves to Wisconsin, no forwarding address, just Gullin. Why Wisconsin? Webb wondered. Why then? He called the Milwaukee Police Department. Check for any records on a David Kowalski, he asked. The reply came back clean. No arrests, no complaints, not even a traffic ticket. For over 20 years, he'd lived quietly in a small suburb called West Allis. Odd jobs, low profile. Married a woman named Patricia in 2005. She did not know about his past in Chicago. Webb leaned back in his chair. 23 years. A man who blended in so well that he might have thought he had finally erased his sins. But the past has a long memory. Then Webb picked up the phone again. Request surveillance, he said. It was time to pay David Kowalski a visit. The Milwaukee Police Department agreed to assist. They sent a pair of plainclothes officers to quietly keep an eye on David Kowalski's house. A modest, one-story ranch on a calm, tree-lined street. A single-car garage, a tidy lawn. It looked like the picture of suburban peace. For 2 weeks, they watched. Kowalski's life was painfully ordinary. He got up early, sat on his porch with a mug of coffee, ran errands, and worked a few shifts at a local hardware store. Evenings were for television, then lights out by 10. Just another retiree in America. But Webb knew better. Behind that calm exterior, he saw a man who'd been running from something for over 2 decades. Webb took everything that he had accumulated, the partial DNA link through forensic genealogy, the timeline, the old behavioral complaints, and the abrupt move to Wisconsin, and presented them all to the Cook County District Attorney's Office in Chicago. Prosecutor Rebecca Ortiz carefully went through the entire file, page by page. It's circumstantial, she finally said, but it's strong. The DNA is the key. If we can get a direct sample from him and it matches, we've got him. So, said Webb, we need a warrant. Ortiz nodded. You've got probable cause. A judge will sign off. Webb sat for a moment, letting the weight of 23 years settle on him. Melissa's family had waited a lifetime. Detective Brennan had retired without answers, and Melissa Turner. Her case had gone cold longer than some detectives' entire careers. Let's bring him in, Webb said. Ortiz gave a solid nod. I'll write up the warrant. 2 days later, it was official. A judge signed the papers. David Kowalski was now the prime suspect in the abduction and presumed murder of Melissa Turner. First and foremost, a call was made by Webb. He dialed the Turner's number, the same one he'd called years ago, back when there was still hope Melissa might be found alive. Robert Turner answered. His voice was soft and aged now, tired in a way only time and heartbreak can make a person sound. Mr. Turner, this is Detective Marcus Webb, Chicago PD. I'm calling about your daughter's case. There was a pause, just the quiet sound of breathing on the other end. Then Robert spoke. His voice shook a little. You found something? Yes, sir, said Webb softly. We do have a suspect. We're making an arrest. I can't reveal more at this time, but I wanted you to hear it from me directly. Robert's breath hitched. After all this time, Webb repeated softly. Does he... Robert's voice cracked. Does he know where Melissa is? Webb swallowed hard, the lump in his throat tightening. We're going to find out. In the background, Webb could hear Linda, Melissa's mom, asking what was happening, then the sound of her sobbing. Thank you, Robert whispered. Thank you for not forgetting her. The call ended and Webb sat in silence. The only sound in the room came from the humming of the fluorescent light overhead. He looked at the photo pinned above his desk. Melissa Turner, 22, smiling, frozen forever in that moment. He stared into it for a long while, then suddenly whispered, "We're coming for him." It was time. A quiet suburban street in West Allis, still dark beneath the pre-dawn sky. Three unmarked cars rolled to a silent stop 2 blocks from the Kowalski residence. Engines off. The doors opened softly. A dozen officers moved out. Chicago PD detectives, Milwaukee tactical officers, U.S. Marshals, and each one focused, each one ready. Detective Marcus Webb adjusted the tactical vest over his shirt. His gun was holstered, radio clipped to his belt. His pulse was heavy, but his hands were steady. 23 years, 7 months, and 28 days. That's how long it had been since Melissa Turner disappeared. Lieutenant Harding from Milwaukee PD gave the final briefing in a low, calm voice. "We've got eyes on the house. Lights off. 2 occupants, Kowalski and his wife, Patricia. No signs of weapons, but we go in careful. Arrest and search warrants confirmed. Chicago takes the suspect. Milwaukee secures the scene. Any questions?" "None." "Let's move." The team split 2 officers to the front door, 2 circling around back. Webb took lead. The house looked heartbreakingly normal. Tan siding, a small porch, an American flag drooping in the still morning air. Flower boxes under the windows, a bird feeder swaying lightly in the breeze, the kind of house you'd never look twice at. Webb climbed the steps, moved to one side of the door, and rapped hard 3 times. "David Kowalski, Chicago Police, open the door." No response. He knocked again, louder. "Police, we have a warrant. Open the door now." Footsteps. A light flickered on. The door cracked open and a woman's face appeared in the gap. Patricia Kowalski blinked in confusion as she grasped the edges of her robe. Her voice was trembling. "What's going on?" "Ma'am," Webb said evenly, "we need to speak with David Kowalski." "Step aside, please. He's asleep. What is this about?" "Step aside now." She hesitated, then slowly moved back as officers swept into the house. "Clear," one called from the kitchen, another from the hall. "Bedroom." Suspect located. Webb followed the voice down the hall. In the master bedroom, David Kowalski sat on the edge of the bed. Barefoot, white t-shirt, sweatpants, thinning gray hair from the crown, a pair of glasses on the nightstand. He was a small man, ordinary really, the type who would blend into any crowd. But when his eyes met Webb's, there it was. Recognition. Not confusion. Not fear. Recognition. He'd been waiting for this moment. "David Kowalski," Webb said, voice firm, calm, deliberate. "You are under arrest for the abduction and murder of Melissa Turner." Kowalski didn't flinch, didn't argue. "Stand up. Hands behind your back." He rose slowly and complied. An officer cuffed him. "I didn't kill anyone," said Kowalski, his tone flat, almost rehearsed. Webb continued, "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney." "I know my rights," Kowalski muttered. Behind them, Patricia's sobs filled the doorway. "David, what is this? What did you do?" He didn't look at her. "Ma'am," said an officer gently, motioning her away. "Please wait in the living room." They led Kowalski from the bedroom, down the hall, and out into the pale light of morning. The street was stirring now, porch lights flicking on, blinds lifting, people peeking through windows. A patrol car waited at the curb, its red and blue lights reflecting off the quiet houses. Webb placed a guiding hand on Kowalski's head, into the back seat. Kowalski sat expressionless, staring directly ahead. Webb closed the door, puffing slowly. It was done. News spread like wildfire back in Chicago. By 8 a.m., every outlet had the story. Arrest made in 2000 cold case disappearance of Melissa Turner. Chicago accountant's 24-year mystery solved through DNA. Wisconsin man charged in Endale woman's murder. The city was abuzz with disbelief and relief all at once. Social media erupted. Reddit threads, Facebook groups, and true crime forums lit up with theories and memories. "I remember when this happened. I lived 2 blocks away. Her family never gave up. DNA genealogy is changing everything. In Endale, the neighborhood where it all started, the reaction was raw. People congregated in coffee houses on sidewalks, outside of old apartment buildings, their conversations hushed, emotional. Vincent Ramos, the neighbor who'd last seen Melissa alive, sat in his nursing home watching the news. Tears streamed down his face. "I knew him," he whispered to a nurse. "David. He used to work around here. I probably said hello to him 100 times. He was right there." Right there. The property management company that hired Kowalski in 2000 also released a statement saying it was shocked and promised full cooperation with authorities. It was a call from Webb himself that reached retired 5 years Detective Sarah Brennan. "We got him," Webb said. Tears filled her eyes as Brennan sank into a kitchen chair, one hand over her mouth. "David Kowalski," Webb said. "Handyman. Worked in her building. DNA matched via forensic genealogy." "I interviewed him," Brennan said quietly, her voice shaking. "October 2000. He was calm, polite. I didn't—" She stopped. "I didn't see it. He was good at hiding," Webb said quietly, "but not good enough." Brennan nodded through tears. "Thank you, Marcus. Melissa deserved this." The Turner family faced the cameras later that afternoon. They stood outside the Area 5 police headquarters, Robert and Linda Turner at the podium, their son Jason beside them. Linda gripped the wooden edge so tightly her knuckles went white. First, Robert spoke. His voice was firm, yet quivering underneath. "For 24 years, we lived in a nightmare, not knowing, not understanding, wondering if the answers would ever come." He paused, took a shaking breath. "Today, we got those answers. It doesn't bring Melissa back. It doesn't erase the pain. But it's something. It's justice." "David Kowalski stole our daughter from us," Linda Turner said, her voice breaking. "He stole her future, her dreams, everything she could have been. And then he lived his life like nothing happened. Got married, had a home, while we buried an empty casket and waited." Her hands trembled as she spoke, but she and Robert kept fighting for Melissa. So did the investigators who never let the case die. Their son Jason stepped forward to the microphone. "Melissa was my big sister," he said. "She helped me with homework, gave me advice, made me laugh." "Will you attend the trial?" asked a reporter. "Absolutely," Robert replied. "And what do you want to say to David Kowalski?" Linda's jaw tightened. "Nothing. He doesn't deserve my words." In Milwaukee, the search teams tore through Kowalski's house. They seized computers, hard drives, boxes of papers, old photographs, and tools from the garage. In the basement, they found a storage bin tucked behind furniture. Inside, newspaper clippings about Melissa's disappearance, flyers from the searches, a photo of Melissa cut from a community newsletter. He'd kept them, like trophies or reminders. 3 days later, the lab called with the result everyone had been waiting for. The DNA taken from Kowalski was a match for the profile recovered from under Melissa's fingernails. She had fought back. She had scratched him. And 24 years later, that evidence finally spoke. David Kowalski was formally charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. He sat in a Milwaukee jail cell awaiting extradition to Illinois. Silent, he refused to speak without his attorney. But the DNA, the timeline, the history, together they were overwhelming. Justice had finally arrived, slow and painful as it was. If Melissa's story has moved you, then please share this video. Stories like that ought not to be forgotten. Hit the share button so her name will never fade. June 2024, Cook County Criminal Courthouse, Courtroom 506. The trial started on a humid Tuesday morning. Outside, protesters held signs. Melissa's photo on poster board. "Justice for Melissa. 24 years too long." Inside the courtroom, every seat was full. Reporters, true crime followers, neighbors who remembered. The Turner family sat in the front row. Robert, Linda, and Jason. Linda clutched the same photo of Melissa that had once been on missing person flyers, worn from years of holding it. At the defense table sat David Kowalski in a gray suit, hands folded. His attorney, Martin Sheff, a seasoned public defender, flipped through notes. Kowalski's wife, Patricia, filed for divorce 3 weeks after his arrest and did not appear in court. Judge Carolyn Vasquez entered. Everyone stood. The people of the state of Illinois versus David Kowalski. Are both sides ready? Ready, Your Honor, Assistant State's Attorney Rebecca Ortiz said. Ready, said Chef for the defense. The opening statement from the prosecution was precise and serious. Ortiz addressed the jury of 7 women and 5 men and laid out the case step by step. On October 12, 2000, Melissa Turner was 25, working, loved by her family, with a future in front of her. That night, someone broke into her apartment, attacked her, and took her life. For 24 years, the question was who? Today, Ortiz told the jury, the answer sat in the courtroom. David Kowalski. She explained how Kowalski had access to Melissa's building, worked there weeks before she disappeared, and fixated on her. When she ignored or dismissed him, Ortiz said he forced his way into her home and ended her life. At the evidence table, Ortiz held up a sealed bag of fingernail clippings. Melissa had fought. Under those clippings, the defendant's DNA. David Kowalski thought he'd gotten away with it, Ortiz told the jury. He moved away, built a new life while Melissa's family suffered. But DNA doesn't lie, science doesn't forget, and today, 24 years later, justice will be served. The prosecution would like you to believe that the partial DNA profile collected back in the year 2000 and reprocessed in 2023 serves as ironclad proof of murder, said defense attorney Martin Sheff, who slowly paced before the jury box. But is it? He paused, letting the question hang. David Kowalski worked in that building. He was a handyman. He touched doors. He fixed furniture. Is it really impossible that his DNA ended up there, by accident transferred through a tool, a surface, a doorknob? Sheff shook his head slightly. There's no body, no murder weapon, no eyewitness placing my client at the scene the night Melissa Turner vanished. What the prosecution has is circumstantial evidence and a theory. Theories aren't proof. And in America, we don't convict people based on guesses. He stopped, faced the jury. David Kowalski is innocent, and the state cannot prove otherwise beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution began calling witnesses. First up, Detective Marcus Webb. He took the jury through the investigation, step by step. The DNA match, the genealogy tracing, Kowalski's unsettling history with women. Next up was Dr. Patel, the forensic scientist. She discussed how the DNA was recovered and tested. Charts, statistics, ratios. The chance that this DNA belongs to anyone other than David Kowalski, she said, is less than 1 in 50 billion. She was cross-examined sharply by Sheff. The sample was degraded, wasn't it? Yes. And it was stored for over 20 years? Correct. So isn't contamination at least possible? Our protocols prevent that, Dr. Patel replied. But possible? She hesitated half a second. In theory, anything is possible. But in practice, no. The match is solid. The defense brought its own experts who questioned the chain of custody and suggested the DNA might have been transferred in innocent contact. But Ortiz wasn't finished. She called Kowalski's ex-wife, who spoke about his temper, his need for control, his obsession with women who didn't return his attention. Then came former employers, tenants who remembered his odd behavior, lingering too long, asking personal questions. Finally, Tom Bradshaw appeared via video link, testifying that Melissa once said she felt uneasy around the maintenance guy. Ortiz built the portrait, piece by piece, a man who didn't snap in rage, but simmered, obsessed, waiting for his moment. And on October 12th, 2000, he took it. 3 weeks later came the closing arguments. Ortiz stood before the jury, her tone steady but full of weight. Melissa Turner fought for her life, she said, and in doing so, she gave us the evidence we needed to find her killer. The science is clear. The timeline is clear. The truth is clear. David Kowalski is guilty. Doubt exists, reasonable doubt. And where doubt exists, Sheff countered, you must acquit. The jury was out for 2 days. On the third, they filed back into the courtroom. Has the jury reached a verdict? Asked the judge. We have, Your Honor. The foreperson stood, paper trembling slightly in her hands. In the matter of the people versus David Kowalski on the charge of first-degree murder, we find the defendant. Linda Turner clutched her husband's hand. Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Robert dropped his head into his hands. Linda broke down in tears. Jason closed his eyes, breathing out decades of grief. Kowalski didn't bat an eyelid. He just stared ahead. Judge Vasquez banged her gavel. Order! Sentencing day, David Kowalski received a sentence of life in prison without parole. He was led away in chains, never once looking at the Turner family. Outside the courthouse, Linda faced the reporters. Her eyes were red and her voice was calm. Melissa can rest now, she said. We can rest now. It's not the ending we wanted, but it's the ending we fought for. In Endale, a mural appeared on the wall near where Melissa's apartment once stood. Her face, her name, her dates, gone but never forgotten. Detective Sarah Brennan came to the mural on a quiet afternoon. She stood for a while, then reached out and touched the painted wall. We got him, kid, she whispered. And for the first time in 24 years, she felt like she could finally breathe. Melissa Turner's case was closed, but thousands more remain open. More than 250,000 unsolved murder cases sit waiting in evidence rooms across America. Boxes stacked high, files gathering dust. Families still holding on, hoping for a knock on the door, a call from a detective, a trace of DNA that finally speaks. Each one represents a stolen life, a future cut short, parents who age waiting, siblings growing up with ghosts, and communities changed forever by violence that was never brought to justice. There was DNA under fingernails, hair fibers, and fingerprints, but the technology just wasn't ready. The databases were small, and matches were few and far between. If a suspect wasn't already in the system, that evidence sat quietly in storage, waiting. But over the course of a decade, something remarkable happened. Forensic genealogy changed everything. Today, investigators can trace a suspect not just through their own DNA, but through distant relatives, family trees, and online databases. And one by one, impossible cases started to break open. The Golden State Killer, the boy in the box, April Tinsley. Names that haunted investigators for generations finally had faces, finally had answers. In 2024, Melissa Turner joined that list. It took 24 years, advances in science that didn't even exist when she vanished, and a detective who refused to let her story fade away. It took a family who never stopped demanding justice, but it happened, and that matters, because every case closed sends a message. You can't outrun time. You cannot bury the truth forever. Justice may be slow, but it's patient and it's relentless. David Kowalski thought he was safe. He had built a new life, lived quietly, believing the past had forgotten him. But Melissa's DNA, those microscopic traces left beneath her fingernails, waited, silent, preserved, ready to speak when the world finally learned how to listen. That's how we should remember her. Not as a headline or case number, but as Melissa Turner. A daughter who called her mom every week, a sister who helped with homework, a young woman in love with her job, her life, and her future. David Kowalski stole all of that. But he didn't erase her. Her family made sure of that. They held vigils. They kept her name alive. They refused to let her fade into the long list of unsolved tragedies. And because of them, and because of detectives like Sarah Brennan and Marcus Webb, Melissa's story got an ending. Not the ending that anyone wanted, but one that mattered. Closure, accountability, and justice. Still, thousands of other families are still waiting for that same call. Evidence waiting for retesting, technology waiting to catch up, hope waiting to breathe again. So the question now is, who's next? Which cold case will finally break open? Which family will finally hear the words, "We got him"? We'll keep telling these stories because they matter, because the victims matter. For as long as one remembers, hope is never lost. Melissa Turner is proof of that. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you never miss a story. We cover cases like this every week, cases that should be told, remembered, and one day solved.